Do you know how much it's going to cost to litigate with Adventure Church?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that we have spent a significant amount of public safety resources managing this situation for the last 15 months, and that our proposal before the council tomorrow is one of the best solutions we've seen come forward to preserve the Tower Theater's historic and economic, role in the Tower District for future generations, and that's our goal, is to preserve that theater.
Now, isn't a matter of public safety and litigating this issue complete different issues?
Our goal is to preserve the Tower Theater and to ensure that there's public access to a parking lot that serves all those local small businesses and the residents nearby. We believe that this proposal achieves that goal to preserve the Tower Theater that's been a federal designated historical asset. I believe that we have the long history and most recent history of being able to preserve historical assets. Just as an example, we're investing $1.2 million in renovating the water tower. We renovated the Santa Fe, train station. Now it's fully operational with buses and tracks.
But at what cost is it worth it?
Well,
is there a price point where you say it's too much?
Well, David, what's the cost of losing historical assets in a city? Some would argue that the city has had a long history of eliminating historical assets. In this case, we are trying to preserve one of the major historical assets in the city of Fresno. That's the economic engine and anchor to the Tower District that serves nearly 100,000 people in our city.
Well, you're the lawmaker. You said that. What number?
Yeah, well, it's going to be the council who decides that. So our proposal will go before the council, and the council will ultimately decide if this is in the best interest of the city.
How much are you going to spend?
The proposal before us, it's what's being considered.
But
and that's what we're bringing forward. I'm not sure I know that.
Well, this lawsuit isn't going away, and if you're taking up the litigation on it, there's going to be litigation ain't cheap.
There's liability in everything we do in the city. There's liability every time we pull somebody over in a traffic stop. There's liability every time we respond to, a fire hazard. There's a liability every time we don't, handle slumlords in the city. So this is the best proposal that we've seen come forward in 15 months. We believe it's the best interest of the city, and it will preserve the Tower Theater, which is our goal, and to ensure public access to a parking lot that serves that whole corridor.
Speaking of that parking lot, if the city does take it over, will it be metered spaces or will it continue to be free?
It would have the option to be metered. We, of course, would have to make some improvements to make it ADA compliant, which it currently isn't.
So that's another cost. How much would that cost?
I don't know. I don't know what those final costs are. We don't know what the extent of the work. But like any parking lot in the city, we have to make it ADA. I mean, we just spent an additional $70,000 in the water tower to make the entrance to the water tower compliant with ADA. We had to invest $400,000 in all the walkway around the water tower to make it ADA compliant. We just, approved an additional $50,000 to make repairs to the roof of the water tower. It costs money to preserve historical assets, and in my view, this is a right proposal to save and preserve the water tower theater in the best interest of all residents in the city.
But should the ballpark estimate of how much it's going to cost be known before you
We do know that. The amount that's being proposed is $6.5 million.
Not just for the sale, but you just mentioned all these other things, litigation costs, ADA costs.
All those are part of owning, public buildings. We have these costs in every public asset that we own. We constantly have to update the public assets to make sure they're compliant with current standards of building codes and of ADA compliance.
You also mentioned that you're concerned about preservation of the theater, but isn't Lawrence Abbott doing that? Isn't the Tower Theater owners already doing that?
It's not a question for me. Our goal is to preserve the Tower Theater for the foreseeable future and for generations to come. And my community, my residents and my constituents, north and south of Olive, have been demanding for 15 months that the city find a way to preserve the economic and the culture and arts engine of the Tower District. And this is the best proposal, in my view, to make that occur.
Now, for churches or other religious institutions to continue to use this, if the city becomes the owner, is that going to cause a rezone?
Any use that's incidental does not cause a rezone. So the primary purpose of that facility will continue to be entertainment, arts, and culture.
So for a church service like that's ongoing now, is that considered incidental use?
That's a question for the attorneys, but what I can tell you is whenever any churches utilize our existing public facilities, they don't constitute a rezone because it's incidental to their use. For example, right now, Dickey Hughes Park is used for church service on Sundays, but the primary use is the park most of the time.
So it sounds like a rezone, in your estimation, would not be required, as the tower protesters have been asking for last year. You don't agree with that rezone is needed?
I'm not going to speak to what people have claimed. I can just tell you that the primary use of this tower theater, if the city was to acquire it, would be to be a public theater available to everyone, and its primary use to be entertainment, arts, and culture events.
And you'd be okay if Adventure Church still uses it on Sundays?
It would be available to all those who would request it, assuming that it's available.
Thank you.
Yeah.